Hello and welcome to the channel. Today I'm excited to share with you something that I've been working on for almost a year. I have been asked to design and build 3 full-size sea snake decoys for Forrest Galante, who has something special planned for them for this year's Shark Week on the Discovery Channel. Follow me through to see how I make these 3 lifelike snake decoys from scratch. Also, you're going to want to be sure to check out what happens to these decoys by tuning into Shark vs. Snake Battle of the Bites on the Discovery Channel for Shark Week. My task is to make 3 full-sized sea snake decoys. Since I don't have a lot of time for development and fabrication, I'm going to need to standardize these so that I can make 3 resin copies of these 4-foot-long, hookless topwater decoys. Generally speaking, sea snakes have a round or flattened body and a paddle-like tail. I'm going to start by making a full-size prototype so I can learn as much as I can. It's not going to be pretty, but I need to figure out how to get it to function first, because getting a 4-foot piece of wood to swim like a real snake isn't going to be easy. Ordinarily, I like to use a 2-part epoxy to glue in my hardware, but for this prototype work, I use a fast-setting glue for rapid testing. I've added some weight to the belly of each segment to keep the decoy upright in the water. I patched the holes with baking soda and Instacure. So I want to talk a little bit more about the design of this lure. What I've got is, of course, I've got my line tie in the front, which is typical, and then I've got my lip, and I've got it angled mostly up and down because I'm not trying to get it to dive or anything. I'm just trying to disrupt the water in the front and get this head to turn. The thought being that if I can get this head to go back and forth, that's going to translate into more slithering all the way down the snake. Now, when I did take this out and try it out like this, I did get a little bit of a slithering action, but it wasn't as much as I really wanted, to be honest. So I'm back here at the workbench and I'm gonna make some different adjustments here. I'll give myself some options that I can kind of tweak out in the field, and we'll try different things and see what works best. Not a bad start, but I'd like to get a much bigger slithering action out of it. Let's try lipless while we're here just to see what that looks like. Taking what I've learned from this first prototype, I've decided to make another full-sized version, but I'm going to make a few changes to it. One is to decrease the overall diameter. You can see this flat-sided one just has an awful lot of mass to it, so I'm just going to go to a round body that's a lot smaller. The other thing I'm going to do is taper the tail a little bit more. On this one, I've got kind of a straight body and then it just tapers right at the tail itself. But I think I'm going to do a more gradual taper. And what I'm hoping that will do is improve the overall action of the decoy. If you want to see more about how I ballast my lures, you can check out the video linked at the upper right corner. Now that we have a good working prototype, it's time to start moving on to the master. Let's start with the head section. For that, I'm going to be using this 1.25" pine dowel. Starting right here, I'm going to have pieces that start to taper. Now for that, I will be using poplar. I will also use that to carve this piece, but I'm just gonna cut a flat piece. You'll see when we get to that point. So I've made myself a jig here out of a board. I've cut this at 30 degrees to help me cut my joints here. Okay, I'm using the table saw here to chop down my width to the correct size, because this is 1.5 inches wide and I need it to be 1.25 inches. You can see I already did this one side where I've got it cut smooth with my dowel here. We're gonna do that same thing on this other side. I got started laying out the scale pattern for this tail by just measuring and doing it all by hand, which was very, very slow and tedious. And I think that's just going to take too long. So I'm going to go back to my old method. I've got a printout of a smaller scale pattern of the same thing, and then I've traced on the back side with pencil, and then I'm just going to tape it onto this and do a transfer, which is still tedious, but maybe it's a little bit more consistent. So using the wood burner, that etches a little bit of a relief in there and gives me my scale pattern. So we'll do that times about 1 billion scales and we'll be done. I'm using this Let's resin silicone rubber because I can buy it in these 1 gallon portions. And it's going to take a lot to make this particular mold. I'm going to go ahead and do equal parts of A and B. Now that we've got this mixed really well, we're going to pour a really thin layer over the whole thing. I'm going to let that sit for just a few minutes here, and then we'll come back and make sure that I don't see any bubbles forming against the parts here. Just letting this sit, most of these bubbles pop themselves, but occasionally they don't. So what you can do is get in there with a toothpick or something, pop it. All right, now that that's had a chance to set up a little bit, let's see what we got. Some minor bubbling here and there, but nothing we can't handle with a little patch. I'm just going to patch these holes with some baking soda and Instacure. This project requires a lot of twist wire hinges. I like using these because they are strong and easy to fabricate. These decoys won't have any hooks, so the only other thing we'll need is a single line tie point in the front. Once we get all the hardware holes drilled and we friction fit the hinges into place, it's time for a test swim. I took the lip out of it altogether. We're going to try it lipless using the same techniques. So when I give it a pause, you can see it really kinks up, and then you can reel it in some more. So you kind of have to work this bait. It's not something you can just throw out there and reel and it just swims beautifully. It's too long for that. You're gonna have to build a technique for it. But I think you can get a pretty good swim out of it by introducing some pauses. And this is the lipless version, so I may just switch to full-on lipless, or leave the slot just in case you wanted to add a lip at some point. But I think it swims pretty good just lipless. Yeah, let it pause, let that head turn, and then when you reel it in again, it really throws a wave through the whole thing. If you want to support the channel and look good doing it, you can now get your official Zimtex merchandise. Just click on the store tab or the link to my website in the video description. There you can find everything Zimtex, including gear, links to the products I use, and other cool stuff. Alright, I've got all my pieces put on little handles here just so I have something to hold on to. It makes it easier to paint and to hang these up when I'm going from piece to piece. Something I don't talk about enough, I don't think, is the safety equipment. Whenever you're doing any painting or sanding or anything like that, you want to be sure and wear a good respirator. And I have a couple here that I'd like to show you. This is the 3M, it's a half mask. And I like this one, and I also will use a full mask from time to time, especially when I'm working with like Instacure, where the vapors will get into your eyes and burn your eyes. They both use the same style of cartridge, and you want to get yourself a good cartridge that's going to filter out all the vapors as well as the the dust particles and things like that, because a lot of this stuff that we're sanding, you don't want to breathe it in. So get yourself some good filters. When I'm not using them, I store them in a Ziploc bag like this just to preserve them and keep them lasting a little bit longer. But what I'm about to do is prime all these pieces. And the first thing I want to do is wipe them all down with some rubbing alcohol here and get any kind of oils. There might be still some mold release or oils from my finger. So I'm going to wipe those all off and get them nice and clean. But the primer I'm going to use is this automotive primer. I'm also going to ventilate the garage, open the door up and get a fan going. We all want to keep making lures as long as possible, so you need to take care of yourself by wearing the proper safety equipment. But anyway, let's get all these pieces cleaned up and get them primed. Okay, so the next step is to paint all of the pieces with this opaque white. And what that's going to do is allow all of my colors to be as vibrant as possible. I'm ready to mix up my base color for this elegant sea snake, and my base color is going to be a yellow. I'm also going to write down how many drops of each that I put in there, so that if I do run out or for some reason I need to make some more, I can duplicate my mixture. I don't know, I feel like it's still a little bit too bright, to be honest. I think we're getting closer. All right, at long last, I think we've got it. All right, this next step is going to be a wash, and we're going to use some of this transparent black We're going to water it down and then we'll apply the wash to the whole thing. Very similar to the wash that we did on both of the alligator builds. These elegant sea snakes have a unique pattern, which I've tried to replicate on the cricket cutter, based on the grid pattern that I used to carve the scales. For these black stripes, I'm going to use some transparent black, and what I'm going to attempt to do is go pretty dark on the top and then fade as I go around to the side, and then when I get to the belly it's just going to be extremely faint. So that's what I'm going to try to do. Hopefully I don't screw it up. That'll start our pattern. Now that I've got my scale pattern sprayed on here, I've got that fade. I'm going to go over these dark scales with a little bit more detail just to make them pop a little bit better. And similar to the wash that I did earlier, I mixed up some more of that yellow with a lot of water here, just to get it pretty thin. I'm going to paint a little stripe down the center of each of these. And you can see I've got just enough on there that I can kind of let it run back and forth. And I'm going to do that for a little while it dries. And you can see how it dries there with the edges being a little bit lighter than the center. That gives it a nice little bit of detail, I think. And then I'm going to put a little bit of paint on each one of these scales as well, but I want to accentuate this dark to light pattern. So I'm going to put a little dot on this first 3 rows here and let it completely set up as is. You'll see what I mean here in a second. The rest of these all the way up, we're going to do a little bit different technique that I discovered here. I'm not sure I discovered it, but I discovered it for myself. Go ahead and put a dot on each one just like before. But from here on up, what we're wanting to do is let as much of that dark shine through as possible. So when it gets to a point here, you can see kind of a little ring starting to form around the edges, but it's still wet. I'm going to take a Q-tip and I'm just going to quickly kind of roll off all that extra paint. And you can see what I'm left with is kind of a little bit of a ring there, which gives it an interesting look. We'll do that the rest of the way up. This particular snake has a very unusual eye, a series of concentric circles. You know, these twist wires and this epoxy make an incredibly tough joint. I actually made a video where I tested this out, and it's incredibly strong. I was really surprised with the results. But if you haven't seen it, I'll put a link up here in the corner so that you can check it out if you haven't seen it already. I highly recommend it. It's kind of an eye-opener. On these flat tail sections, I can't really use a twist wire joint on that one because the gap would be too big and it doesn't look good. So what I'm going to go with on this particular lure is I'm going to use some of this 150-pound braid, which ought to be more than enough to do what I'm wanting it to do. The problem is, since it's braid, it's kind of really flexible, which is why I picked it. But that makes it hard to glue into these little holes. But I think I've found a method that works pretty good here. I've been experimenting with it a little bit. I straighten it, and then I'm gonna put just a little bit of this really thin Instacure, just a little ways on it, just to harden that up enough that I can make kind of a pin with it. And then once that sets up, I can glue it into place. While I'm waiting on that, I can drill these holes back out because I got a little bit of glue and paint in them, so I'm going to re-drill them here. Okay, and then we can come back to this. I'm going to use this extra strength Instacure, and then I'm going to put it in the hole there. Try and get as much down in there as I can, and I'll do that for each one of those. But here's a piece I went on ahead and did all of them on there, and I can pull on this one as hard as I want and it doesn't budge. So hopefully 5 strands ought to be strong enough to hold it together for what I want to do, and it's still very flexible. So that should give me the movement I want and the strength that I want. Now we're going to move on to painting the other two, starting with the much simpler olive sea snake. The last species we need to make here is a yellow-bellied sea snake. So I'm going to start off with a pretty bright yellow. As we get close to the tail section, there's a symmetrical wavy pattern, and I've got an idea about how to do that with this masking tape. What I'm going to do is put some tape on either side of this wax paper. It's about a 12-inch segment that we're talking about here. So we're going to try this. I don't know if it'll work or not, but we'll see. My idea is to take this and I should be able to peel off each side symmetrically. But if I kind of align that with the bottom like that, there, that's symmetrical. Alright, we're ready to do some final swim tests on the elegant sea snake, lipless version. Let's get a final weight on this thing. .27 pounds. Now that these are done, I'm shipping them off to Forrest Galante for filming in Australia. If you want to see how these snake decoys perform, check them out this Shark Week on the Discovery Channel. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe so that I can make more of the content you want to see. And as always, feel free to leave a comment. I appreciate your feedback and support. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one.